Good evening and welcome to LegalTech Live. This is episode 69. We have our returning guest, Tunji Williams. Tunji is here to tell us about his experience with DealWIP. Tunji is now the Director of Strategy for Transaction Management at Latera Microsystems. Previously, he's one of the founders of DealWIP, and DealWIP was a due diligence project management software. In a Q&A, due diligence Q&A software, I should say. And my guest co-host tonight is Kat Moon. Most of you know her from Twitter. If you don't, you should get to know her. And I learned a little bit something here, Kat, when I was looking at your profile. Director of the PoLI Institute in Innovation Design, Program on Law and Innovation, lecturer in law, instructor in radiology and radiological services. That one was all new to me. I had no idea that was part of your background. So
joint appointment.
Yeah. So thank you both for being here. Tunji, very grateful that you came back to the show. I really appreciate this. I know from a lot of listeners and viewers in the past that they really need to know, all part of the entrepreneurial journey, what happened, what it was like, and when did you decide, okay, we can't go any further? So I'm really, really grateful. And Kat, this is a very easy conversation, so you cut me off at any time if you have a follow-up question. And Tunji, DealWIP, what happened?
Well, I'll note, first off, this is actually my third interview, isn't it?
It is the third interview. The first one, unfortunately, was lost forever. So it is technically his third interview with us. He was gracious enough to come back and do a second one. Grateful. We're also very grateful for that. So this is technically his third. Tunji, DealWIP, it was fascinating. It was a very smooth operating system when you showed it to us on the show. It was what I, not having any merger and acquisition experience, it looked like the type of program, the type of software that I would find useful had I been. It was sort of a Slack, as I recall, for mergers and acquisitions, or at least that's how it worked in my mind when you guys showed it to us. So tell us what happened in the journey, the startup journey.
Well, first of all, thanks a lot for having me back. It's good to be back here. I missed you guys. It's you told me it's been 35 episodes.
34 actually, almost 35.
That's unbelievable.
It's crazy how much things change and time goes by. But thank you for being here. A whole lot happened. It was about 2.5 years total. Okay.
We were working on DealWIP in earnest. About 3.5 years since I first had the idea. So, a good amount of time working on it, investing in it, both in, time and money, and sweat. Ultimately, we ran out of money.
Okay.
A lot of startups do, it's one thing to have a great idea. It's another thing to build a team around that idea. And it's another thing, I think, to take off as a commercial venture.
Right.
And we spent the last 1.5 years trying to figure out exactly how to reach, escape velocity, the application we built. And we just found it difficult for a number of reasons to execute in a way that would allow the business to become self-sustaining.
Gotcha.
And reached a point where we just had to make a tough decision and ask ourselves, what's the responsible thing to do considering all the people and the stakeholders involved in DealWIP? And the right decision, still believe, was to close down the company for the time being.
Excellent. And that was when I got the email that you guys were closed. You said it specifically that this was a pause. You're pausing operations, and I thought that was an interesting way to put it because the software is still there. The product is still built, correct?
Right. I mean, that's the cool thing about software. I think that's part of what inspired us to get started is, software is evergreen that way. you build something wonderful that's actually useful and helpful, it never really goes away. That code base lives on. The problem we were trying to solve lives on. So there's no reason to, just because we're closing the business for the time being, there's no reason to put DealWIP away forever. So right. I thought, just a more appropriate way to describe what we're doing, and we're just pausing and waiting to see what the future holds.
That's great. That's great. And can you tell us anything about the adoption rate? Were you able to get some pretty good user feedback and some pretty good customers, paying customers during your active time, even though you couldn't find a way to escape velocity? Were you getting some pretty good paying customers?
So the ugly truth about legal technology is it takes a really long time to sign paying customers.
Yeah.
Especially when you're building a tool that is focused on big law use cases. At the end of the day, large law firms just take a long time to evaluate tools. They have really stringent requirements for the tools they use. And even if you've got a great product people on the ground like, it still takes 9 months to a year and a half to get your foot through the door. And that's just the beginning of the journey, because once you're through the door, there's then a long process to actually convince people on the ground to use your tool and begin to incorporate it into their practice. And most startups are just not well capitalized enough and well positioned enough to last for that journey.
For that type of a long sales cycle, that's for certain.
Exactly.
Yeah, please jump in. Do not be afraid. This is the.
Yeah, well, I'm really curious to that point, Tunji. Your experience with DealWIP, is there a takeaway that kind of informs how you would approach things differently were you to do this again? Were you to hit the unpause button, or in your current role, like what are some takeaways that could inform how those constraints can be approached?
So after we decided we're going to close the company, I had a lot of time to think. I had about 3 months where I was trying to figure out what went wrong. What would we do to try to salvage the dream and salvage the product we built? And I realized you can't really tie a neat bow around the experience and say, here's the takeaway. Next time I'll do this, because it's just not that easy. Business is tough, and no one is entitled to win. And if there were a secret that you could just discover, there would be lots more business successes than there are. I think it's just a matter sometimes of timing, fortune. I'm one of those people that believe that things happen for a reason, in a certain way, for reasons, and it just wasn't our time. Things didn't come together the way they needed to for us to reach that escape velocity. Looking back, I think what I tell. I'll be honest, I did do a postmortem, and I do think fundamentally there are some things that we needed to have in place that we did not in order to give us a better chance of being successful. But I think the more I think about it, most companies, whether in legal tech or outside of the space, that end up doing very well are able to discover some unfair advantage. And sometimes that's apparent to the world, exactly what that is. It could be some technological innovation. It could be some barrier to entry that they've erected, but there's something that you've got that nobody else in the world can get fast enough or as cheap as you've gotten. And you're able to if you're able to execute quickly enough to increase the gap between you and the rest of the market, you reach escape velocity. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs believe that you can build a lot of beginning entrepreneurs believe, as I did, that you can build a great company, a lasting company, just on grit and a great idea. I think there's a lot more to it, and I think I'm less naive than I was before about business, but also super optimistic, because I think if you're looking in the right places and you're motivated by the right things, you'll discover that an unfair advantage, so to speak. You're more likely to discover it. So I think next time, if I ever do go into business for myself again, I'll be looking for that. And I think the best place to look for it is with the people you're trying to serve, by listening, trying to understand needs in a way that your competitors just don't. And that's the beginning of it.
Well, Tunji, you're getting all sorts of love here in the Facebook group.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah. So I want to thank Diego Alcala, Aaron Levine is here, Troy Robinson and Lori Gonzalez are watching. Lori says hello to,
Hi, Lori.
To both of you. Just loves you both. And they just a lot of love. They know that it's this is a difficult experience. So please, anybody ask questions, I'll be happy to communicate those. Yeah, and Aaron Levine of Hello Divorce says, can you give us a little bit of the summary on how he developed the idea of DealWIP? Now, we discussed this quite a bit in episode 35, which was, you did it out of your own, as I recall, you did it out of your own need to make your life easier when you were a mergers and acquisition attorney, right? But yeah, you can go into that a little bit more.
Yeah, it was an idea born of frustration and anxiety from practicing in big law. Being a young person who was really ambitious and thought the job was going to be one way, and then getting there and realizing that it wasn't quite what I was expecting, and feeling very disillusioned and worried that I was not doing the right things at the right time, the right way. And I desperately wanted a tool that would allow me to do kind of what I've done in other areas of my life to get good at things, which is just watch people who are really good and try to model my own practice or my own behavior after them, and make it my own over time. And I found that there weren't really great ways to do that at my own speed within the big law context. So I started to dream of a tool that would allow me to kind of open up closed matters that were done by lawyers whom I respected, and kind of go back and look at their matters, explore their matters the same way an athlete goes and watches game tape. Oh, what did the lawyer do when the client said this? How many turns of the document or the agreement were there? What kind of markups were made and why? What was the bedside manner like? How did the attorney communicate with the client about this matter at this time? And kind of use all that information to begin to model my own practice. But I realized there's no way to do that, because so much of the work you do as an attorney is done on a bunch of disaggregated tools. So to get that story, you kind of have to bring a whole bunch of different workflows together to be able to examine a closed matter. And I thought, that wouldn't be the case if we somehow did all of our work in one place. So that was the genesis of the idea. It's like, it'd be really cool if there were some end-to-end system that housed the entire workflow for a given transaction, such that when it's closed, you can go back and review it the same way you would game tape in sports, and learn how to make yourself better, learn where there are gaps in the way you work or improvements can be made. And people can begin to use that as a teaching tool and a performance enhancement tool. So that's where the concept came from, really just trying to get better and looking for resources to help myself, and realizing that what I needed didn't exist yet. So why not make it for myself? So that was the genesis of the idea. It was initially an end-to-end tool. We got into the MDR Lab program, and I think that was the first time I realized that there's a lot of benefit to holding up your ideas, as great as you think they might be, to scrutiny from people who actually will use it. It's a humbling thing when you think you've got a great concept or something that's pure art, and then people tear it apart and show you how to make it better. But I think that taught us that we needed to make something else, something a little bit different. And that's how we came up with the due diligence collaboration platform, or Q&A system, that DealWIP ended up being.
Excellent. Yeah, Erin says thank you. She appreciates that background. Kat, go ahead.
So, well, I've heard you actually pull some really fantastic threads out of this experience, Tunji. And I agree. I don't think it's I don't think we should strive to look backwards and come up with sort of this grand vision for the lessons you learn from something not working out. But you've articulated some really helpful points, I think, for anyone who is contemplating or currently building a tool for lawyers right now. And you've actually hit on quite a number of things that kind of sort of drive stakes in my heart a little bit, because I wish that some of these constraints weren't so kind of hard and fast. And you talk about like the long sales cycle and the resistance to change and these things. And I'm curious if, because you came to this. So I think part of the beauty of your story is you came to this wanting to create a tool to help yourself. So not only do you want to empathize with the folks you're trying to help, but you are one of the folks you're trying to help. And so I wonder, kind of where you see the biggest opportunity right now to kind of forge ahead, in making change in this sphere.
Huh. That's a good question. Honestly, I'm really excited about what it is I'm doing now. I get the opportunity at Latera to continue to pursue the vision we had at DealWIP, but do it within an organization that already has established trust, right, amongst the community that we're looking to serve, that has wide distribution already. So they don't have to reinvent the wheel with each new product that they introduce to the market. It's just a matter of taking advantage of the channels of distribution that they've established over a long period of time. So I'm very excited about forging a path with them. If I think more broadly or just generally about what I'm excited about in this space, I'm excited about any tool that democratizes the means of production. I think that's where the future is across spheres, whether we're talking about media or legal service delivery, anything that makes it easier for people to reduce the gap between the work they do and the value that's created from that work, bringing people closer to their work and giving them control over their means of production. That democratizing force is really exciting to me. And I think it's a force that widens opportunity for more people. And it also creates interesting new microeconomies. So when I think about the future of legal service delivery, I think there's going to be, I've thought this since we started DealWIP, there's going to be serious splintering that happens across the legal services industry in terms of large law firms becoming smaller, some of them ceasing to exist the way they do today, and a lot of practitioners going into business for themselves and working differently and servicing smaller clients. And when they're equipped with the tools necessary to spin up a law firm of your own overnight, the way AWS allows teenagers to spin up their own companies overnight, you've got a very interesting and diverse legal services economy that could begin to emerge. So any company that's focused on creating tools that empower people and give them access to the means of production, that's really, really interesting to me. So I got my eye on that type of stuff.
Excellent.
Beautiful.
That's really fantastic stuff. And you're getting so much great feedback here in the live stream. Chris Conjero says, all your reflections are 100% right. I truly appreciate you and your journey. Lori Gonzalez asks, does Tunji believe a better, and there's another question coming from Diego, that Diego and I are on the same path here, but I want to get to Lori's question first. Does Tunji believe a better funding or investment option would have made a difference, i.e. if more money was available to cover the longer sales cycle?
Yeah, I mean, short answer is yes. The team was looking to raise, a couple of $1 million to continue building what we were building. And I think it would have made a difference to have that money available to us. But I mean, at the end of the day, when you're building the business, you don't deserve funding. because you have a good idea. You've got to convince people that you've got an idea that's great and also commercially viable. And sometimes that just doesn't happen for whatever reason. So that's a part of the journey. And I think next time there are things that we might do differently when looking for supporters, looking for investors at that next stage where we're looking to take the company to. So definitely a learning experience. But short answer is yeah, more money absolutely is helpful.
Right. Yeah. Certainly with the long sales cycle, which
Yeah, that can be an unfair advantage sometimes, right? If you've got access to capital that others don't, it gives you time to figure things out.
Right.
It doesn't make you any smarter, or any better of an operator. It just gives you more time, and time is everything. Building a startup and scaling it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now Diego asks, it appears that he did the switch from non-lawyer or the switch to non-lawyer a few iterations ago. What was that journey like? So I was thinking the same thing, Tunji. You went from lawyer to startup founder, now over to your position at Latera Microsystems. You did not choose to go back to the practice of law. I thought that was interesting. So can you tell us what that journey was like? Are you done? Are your days practicing behind you, do you believe? Do you find more value in the business world?
Yeah, I think I'm finished practicing. You can't be certain. I didn't know that I would be in the position I'm in 2 years ago, even 6 months ago. I didn't know I'd be here. So I can't say for certain what the future holds. What I do know is I like to build things. I like to think about the future, and I like to build things that help move us towards the world as I see it tomorrow and into the future. And there are just lots of opportunities to do that as you build businesses. I love the legal services industry. I think it's really interesting. I love the kinds of people that are drawn to this type of work, and the opportunity to build tools that change the way they work for the better is fun to me right now. I absolutely love it. The honest truth is, I was thinking about going back to practice. I think the ugly truth that people may not talk about enough is that sometimes you're trapped in legal practice because you accumulate ridiculous amounts of debt going to law school. So while you may desire to do other things, or you have other interests or curiosities, you got to take a job that pays close to what you make as a first-year associate, just to be able to keep up with your loan payments. So that was part of my consideration after trying to build this business. Is okay, I got to go and find something that's going to allow me to make payments on the loans I still owe to Navient. So I would have gone back to practice if I didn't come across this wonderful opportunity.
Kat, what have you got? I see the wheels turning there.
Well, no, I think your story, Tunji, just affirms so much of what I see and hear from others. And your story is really valuable also for law students to hear. So I'm definitely going to share this podcast after the fact with some students. So you are an example of someone who found a path that allowed you a wider breadth of choice. And I think that it's important for folks to see that modeled and to see those opportunities happen. I'm hopeful there are going to be more and more of those opportunities. So I'm grateful to you for sharing this and letting others see and know that these other opportunities exist and are viable. The debt problem is a wicked problem, frankly. Yeah.
I think some advice I would give, to the extent it's helpful, is that don't be afraid, I think, as a young attorney, to create your own job.
Yeah.
I think that for me in the past, not just in the legal tech sphere, but before, has always been a path to freedom. Don't look to fit yourself into jobs that exist if they're not you. Think of exactly what it is you'd like to achieve, what you want to do, and then you create a title for that job after the fact, right? So focus on what it is you're trying to achieve, what you're trying to make, and then you can figure out what the role is that allows you to do that after the fact as a secondary matter. So when I was at the firm I was with, great firm I was with before I left practice, Miles and Stockbridge, I started to get interested in, building and scaling technology. So I went to the head of the firm and said, oh, you know what, I'd love to run an incubator here, or just basically a program that allows us to begin looking at our processes within the firm, looking at our culture, looking at our people, and building technology around what we already do. Because the future of legal services delivery, I still believe, is going to be some optimal combination of products and services. There's not going to be a firm in the world that's going to be able to exist and scale properly unless they offer the market some optimal combination of those two things. And the best way to do that, when you already got processes and services that work really well, is to look at them and figure out how can we productize this. So that's what I wanted to do at my firm. And I wanted to create a job for myself, like be the director of that incubator. And it just wasn't possible to get that off the ground. So that's part of how DealWIP was born as well. I'm very interested in achieving that. The best way to do it is just to go out and start my own company. So focus on what it is exactly you want to do and think about the role afterwards.
Interesting. So your thought processes, and I bring this up on occasion, Nabil Zoomout, the CEO of experts.com, where I work, he left the practice of law for much the same reason or similar reasons that you did, and started experts.com many years ago for similar reasons, or what I'm hearing are similar reasons, and that he just didn't see the practice of law as an efficient way to address dispute resolution. And you couldn't get a certain thing off the ground, and you decided that you were better off building something much the way he did. And I find that very interesting in the entrepreneurial journey. I hear that more often than not. I also want to make the point that this is episode 69, and I think that's 69 out of 69 episodes that we've talked about the long sales cycle of legal technology. So Andrea Rosso asks, now that you are on a different path of the law business, what should we be doing as lawyers to be more creative? You certainly do have a creative side to you. That's I think what took you to the entrepreneurial journey. So
yeah. Oh, that's a really good question. What I would say is question everything and try to the extent you can. And sometimes it's really difficult because it's scary, but try to think about everything at a first principle level. Don't accept the assumptions that are passed down to you about things. Just look a little bit closer at everything. And ask, why do we do this again? My dad always taught me growing up that if you can't answer 6 layers of questions, 6 layers of why about something, you don't really know it that well. And if you can't explain it to a baby or a 5-year-old, you don't really know it that well. So the things that you care about and you're really interested in, question the way we do things now. Question the people in charge. And if you think there's a better way to do it, explore it. And a lot of times there is. And I think from that type of thinking comes really great results. So long as you're faithful to the journey and you put in the hard work necessary to build something of real value after you ask those questions. It's one thing to ask questions. It's another thing to build something of value stemming from those questions.
But you do have to ask the questions in order to get the thought process going as to how do we build something of value.
Exactly. And you hit something when people are opposed to you. if everybody loves what you're doing, you're probably not doing something worthwhile, or you haven't really hit on something. There should be vehement opposition to what you're doing. That's how you know you've hit on something raw, a raw nerve, and then chase that doggedly. There's something there. If everybody's running in one direction, I think you're best going the other way.
I think I'd like to dig into that a little bit more. That seems to be how many of the successes that we see, massive startup successes, it seems to be that they faced major opposition multiple times, and that's how when the status quo thinks that is really opposed to what you're doing, that's a good indicator. Now, it may not mean that you're going to be successful, but it may be a great indicator that you might be massively successful, because we certainly see that with several of the scions of Silicon Valley and other areas, that they found something where people were massively opposed to it, and they just chased that. How did you come to that realization that was?
I think just reading, to be honest. It's not, those aren't my ideas. I'm borrowing stuff I've read and I've heard. But I think transformative innovation is all about questioning things that seem fundamental, that seem like they've always existed, like there's some, they've been divinely passed down. I think those are the things that most people don't bother to question. So my wife and I played this game where we think about assumptions that kind of guide the way we live life. And then we get into conversations about, what if we flip that on its head? What if we stop believing that? What flows from that? And I think that's a really fun exercise. If you're looking for some creativity in your life, think about the things you hold dearest, the things you think are sacred, and flip the assumptions underlying those things, and think about what the world looks like in that situation. There are other innovations that are incremental tweaks, right?
Mm-hmm.
To fundamentally believe, and there's a place for those things. But if you're really trying to leave a dent in the universe, I think you have to question the things that seem like they're divine truths.
Are you sure you're a lawyer, Tunji?
No.
Do you have a follow-up to that, Kat? It sounds like there's something.
Well, I'm just observing. I think that those are absolutely fundamental mindsets and qualities of a successful innovator. And sadly, I don't see enough of that kind of bubbling up. And so I wish I could bottle some of your essence and share it with others. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you're speaking to the audience as well, Tunji. I mean, I'm getting a lot of comments here. People are just loving what you're saying. Thank you from Andrea Rosso, Diego Alcala, Kat. I'm loving this. Everybody's saying great insights here. And Diego asks, and we all hear about it regularly, how is the diversity in legal tech? And we see it not making the dent that we wish we were having. What was your experience like with that?
It depends upon what type of diversity you're speaking of. I think there is diversity in some senses. There's diversity of thought. There's a diversity of approach. I think we could be better in terms of racial diversity and gender diversity. But these aren't new things, and they're things that we're looking to improve upon in legal services anyway. Diversity. This is my personal thing. Diversity as an end state is great. It's wonderful. It's a good thing to achieve. But I think we've got to ask ourselves, what are we trying to achieve when we create diverse environments, when we create diverse industries, and who are we trying to serve? I think what's important to me as a minority in legal technology is not so much being in a room where there are 5 others like me who also happen to be there to serve this purpose, right? Having a diverse room. I want to be a part of an industry where there is opportunity for everyone. It's not so much the end state, but let's provide the tools necessary in the equality of opportunity such that everybody has a shot at succeeding. Sometimes that'll mean that the room is not as diverse as you'd like. But I'm less concerned about the end state and more concerned about the mechanisms and the infrastructure. Because if you don't make those fundamental changes, right, to create a system that's more equal fundamentally, you can create cosmetic diversity that's superficial and doesn't actually serve the people that ought to be served. So I think thinking really deeply about some of the structural, I'll call them deficiencies, that make it difficult for everybody to access the same opportunities, I think is a worthwhile endeavor for all of us. And these systems just develop over time. It's difficult to reverse some of the dynamics that have been set in motion that create the world we have today, right, and the way our industries look. But I don't think they're evil actors. It's just a matter of inertia. And I think the way you reverse something that's in motion is you apply equal force the other way. And that requires thinking very deeply about things at a structural level, not cosmetically.
I hope everybody out there is seeing what I got to see in the first interviews with Tunji is very thoughtful, incredibly thoughtful guest. And I thank you, Tunji, for coming again and sharing this with you. As Diego says, as a Puerto Rican, please tell Tunji that it is amazing to see him and other minorities succeed. So there is value. There's huge value to that. We have to see others who are like us succeeding. So thank you, Diego, for commenting on that.
Can I offer one more thing on that, Nick? I'm sorry.
Yeah, please.
But I think it's so important, and I wish more people would say it. Part of helping others along is when you do achieve something or you do break through in some way, it's turning around and showing the blueprint and not acting like you're a magician. We all struggle with things. We all try to figure things out. And when you do figure things out, it's not a zero-sum game. You don't lose if you turn around and you offer the blueprint to others. You gain something. Right. When you pull people up, they will push you up and elevate you. So there's something to be said for sharing the answer once you pass the test. Not cheating, but sharing.
Excuse me. Yeah, and Lori mentions Tunji has more heart than most, and it's an honor to see him in any capacity. I don't get these kind of glowing reviews from most people. I mean, you do have a way with words in your experience, Tunji. Kat, what have you got?
You captured it so beautifully, Tunji. I mean, we go faster and farther together, right? And you don't diminish yourself by sharing with others. And so, as Lori has expressed, we're grateful to you for, being willing to be vulnerable, frankly. I mean, I think that there are a lot of probably valid reasons that folks don't necessarily share, both the good and the bad. And so, again, it's really, I think, important and helpful for others to see you model that, and so beautifully. So, because we most certainly go faster and farther together.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's very, very important. Tunji, tell us a little bit. We've covered the DealWIP experience. Tell us how Litera Microsystems came to be. How did that position? Was this developed out of your DealWIP experience? Tell us a little bit about that and what you're doing with them now.
Yeah, it came about from just a fortuitous phone call from my friend Haley Altman, for whom I have a lot of respect. I watched her, over the years, travel to every corner of the country, building her business, building a team, and selling her product, one firm at a time, one relationship at a time. I think she epitomizes persistence and vision, I think, in spite of adversity. And she reaped the benefits for sticking with it, and really believing in what she was building and building something of true value that people really wanted. So I got a call from Haley as I was trying to figure out what to do next, and she asked me to meet her for coffee in Manhattan. And we said at that point I was resolved to going back to practice. And she just painted a picture for me that was extremely compelling. And I think our visions for the future can overlap and align. And she just convinced me that Latera is the place to really build out what we both see as the future of transaction management. So I couldn't turn down the opportunity, and here I am.
That's fantastic. And what is your role there now? You can tell us a little bit more about the role.
They call me the director of strategy for transaction management, and it's just a fancy way of saying that my job is to help our customer base adopt our tool, our transaction management tool. It's, as you know, adoption is the #1 challenge in legal technology. It's one thing to buy a tool. It's another thing to help make a tool indispensable in practice, especially when people aren't used to it. And that's about more than creating something cool and valuable, but changing the way people behave. And that requires understanding the way organizations think and understanding the way people think about adopting technology and then finding ways to influence behavior. So that's our job. Is just my job is to spur year one adoption. So once the firm makes the decision to purchase the tool, trying to grow the rate of adoption within that firm exponentially during the first year.
So essentially building it into their workflow so that they're using the tool.
Yeah, I think of it like a political campaign. Right? Okay. Like you get voted in at your first term congresswoman. And now your job is to make sure you get reelected and you win with resounding numbers to protect your territory. So I work on the reelection campaign for transaction management.
I like that. And Chris Conjero, a former guest who is a non-lawyer, asked this question. This is a good question. Did you feel that as a former attorney entrepreneur, you had an advantage over other other non-attorney legal tech entrepreneurs with breaking through that early and really difficult part of the sales process?
Good question.
Yes, in some ways. I think just as a matter of perception, I think people respond differently to lawyers. Customers respond differently to lawyers. I think you're afforded credibility that you might not have otherwise. Rightly or wrongly,
right?
But the thing is that you don't keep that if you don't have the stuff to back it up. So it's an advantage you can lose pretty quickly. But there are also plenty of disadvantages as well. I think #1 are the frameworks you use to think about things. Sometimes can be pretty rigid, just because that's just how we're taught. Right? There are formulas for everything in the law, and sometimes just things don't work that way. So the ability to break free of that. Or not be constrained by it to begin with can be an advantage as well. So retraining yourself in the way you think about problem solving.
Interesting. Very, very good answer there. And Lori Gonzalez asks, what's your best weapon for creating more adoption in this new position with Latera Microsystems?
Listening, honestly. And that sounds trite, but like one of my biggest pet peeves is when you're talking to somebody and you can tell that they're just thinking about what they're going to say next, because it makes me feel like the conversation is just a dance, right? But it's a dance off as opposed to a partner dance. And I think a great conversation is about two people moving together to a song, and you can only do that if you're both listening to the beat. And I think in a conversation, the beat is the detail. Sometimes it's what goes unsaid is as important as what's said. The people will tell you a lot about themselves and what they need if you truly tune in and listen. So I think my secret weapon is really being able to listen, and sometimes paying attention to the negative space. What is not said will lead you to real value sometimes.
Kat, we're about 40 minutes in here. I don't want to keep Tunji or yourself all night. I want to thank you both for being here. Do you have a final question for Tunji?
No, I don't know that I do. I think that he's just shared some incredible nuggets for those who are listening and paying attention. And I really love that you ended this with that example of listening, because I think that is an incredible superpower. And it may seem trite or simple or obvious, but it's incredibly hard to do it well because it requires intention. And Latera is incredibly lucky to have you, Tunji.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you.
Very lucky, very lucky. Tunji, how can people get in touch with you now?
Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, at Tunji Williams. You can email me at my work email. It's twilliams@latera.com. Yeah, I'm always available, and I'll try to respond as quickly as possible.
Awesome. And Kat, how do people get in touch with you?
Oh, I'm at Inspired Cat on Twitter. So yeah, come say hey.
Excellent. And thank you both so much for being here. Thank you, everybody, for your excellent comments and questions in the live stream. We appreciate that. Tunji, thanks again for coming back and sharing your experience with us. We really appreciate it. I can tell by the commentary that it meant a lot to a lot of people who are going through many of these struggles right now. So thanks so much for sharing.
Thanks for having me and hearing me out. A real pleasure.
Thank you. And that's it for episode 69, folks. We'll be back with our final episode of the year next year, episode 70, and that'll be it for the year. We're going to wrap up early in December so everybody can go and enjoy their holidays. See you then.